we are very excited about the scriptable API builders and scripting as a service. These are two really what I'd consider hybrid capabilities that we're able to do within dotCMS because we offer a scripting language on top of the content repository, and that scripting language over the years has been tuned and is really highly performant and can deliver content at a really high rate. So using that same technology, we can allow our users to build really custom REST endpoints that access the dotCMS content repository and information within the dotCMS in custom ways that contain custom logic without touching a line of Java code. That really pushes the level of expertise needed to build a REST endpoint up to, let's say, a front-end developer, a web developer can come in and develop their own endpoints and be comfortable knowing that that's going to be backed by the performance of the dotCMS's front-end delivery tier. So let's dive right in here. Well, what we've done with the scriptable REST endpoint is allowed you to call velocity scripting via a REST API. So we've hooked it up to a JAX-RS endpoint. What that allows you to do is to call what we call Vtl files, scripting files that live under this API Vtl folder, and you can pass them parameters, you can pass them a JSON body, you can pass them, they have full access to the request and the response and the session. They can be authenticated, and authentication is, and the permissions of them are based upon the permissions of the files that are under that folder. But the beauty of it is that these Vtl files can live outside of dotCMS. They can be versioned outside of dotCMS. And each of these files are responsible for the HTTP method which they're named for. So HTTP GET is going to call the GET VTL, which is going to generate the response for a GET call. HTTP POST is going to be responded to by the POST VTL. And that way, the logic of each of the different HTTP actions can be separated out into different files. Going back to our example, I have the movies example, right? So we looked at some of these movies, X-Men or Angels and Demons, some of these. But coming here to this API Vtl folder, let's say I wanted to create a custom endpoint for those movies. Let's say I wanted to not only pull, not only do we want to pull this content, but maybe we want to format it in a particular way. Maybe we want to provide a particular query that can be passed in to query the content repository. So we do have our content APIs, and those aren't going away, but this provides just a lot of flexibility when you want to define what dotCMS is going to send back to you based upon either logic or parameters passed in, what have you. So let's take a look at the VTL files, the velocity of the script that is needed to generate responses. So we'll first take a look at the GET VTL. And if you're familiar with velocity, this is going to look very familiar to you. I'll walk through it a little bit step by step. But what this is doing is the script is checking to see whether we have a path param, right? And that would be a parameter in the URI. And if we do, let's say it would be the ID of the movie, then what we're going to do is find that particular movie by ID. Otherwise, what we're going to do is do a content pull and pull let me zoom this in, and pull the list of movies, the top 10 movies ordered by title. Then what we're going to do in Velocity, we're going to create an array, and we're going to loop over each movie in the movie list, and then we're going to create a map, a Java map. This is a map that we can just put values into, and we're going to put the values that we want into that map. So, for example, we put the identifier of the movie, the title, the year, the poster image. So the movies have a related poster, this poster here, and what we're doing is we're pulling that poster image and we're getting the URL for that poster image. So that's what we want in order so we can reference the poster. We're also pulling the rating, and this is interesting because if we go back and take a look at the movie again, this rating is a new relationship, a relationship field. And you can see here we can just, within our scripting language, use dot notation to pull the movie the rating, and then the rating title for that movie. Here we can pull the genre, and that is not how you spell genre. And here we can pull the Rotten Tomatoes. And then another thing, we can pull the studios. And again, this is a relationship field. What this relationship field is a list. Now, the rating relationship is a single entity. You can only have a single rating per movie, but you can have multiple studios on a given movie. And so what we return there when you call movie studio is a list. So we build a list and we put that into our map. We add that to this result list. And then what we do, and this is I think the interesting part, is we have a .json object, right? This .json object is a special object for these VTLs. You can populate that. Then when the API is called, that's what's going to be rendered. And so what we're doing is we're putting the movie list into our result list here. We also have this value. I think this is a really interesting value. You have the ability to cache the response to set the cache for the response within the code. So if you set a value for .cache for 10 seconds, this response is going to be cached for 10 seconds, and that makes calling that API super performant. So let me go ahead and drag new API into the API VTL folder. So I'm going to drag all of these up here, and you can see here that the web dev is going to automatically drop those into dotCMS. And if we come back to dotCMS now, we can see that these files are available, right? So let's take a look, and here's the get file we were just looking at. And now to call this API, let's take a look at what it looks like. Let's open a new browser, and it's movies. And this is a convention base. It's the name of the folder that this VTL is under, and this is going to be a HTTP GET call. And so what it's going to return to me here is the response of the GET VTL in perfectly formed JSON, right? And you can go down and see that we have our identifier, we have our title, we have our URL for the poster image, right? And so if I hit this poster image, it's going to give us that URL, or it's going to give us that image. The tags here, the Rotten Tomatoes score, and then the studio. Or if I want to pull just a single movie, we can say, okay, let's pass the ID, and it's going to pull a single movie. And what that's doing, that's falling into this if set path param, and then just pulling the single movie, right? So the .json is in charge. This object here, again, if it's populated, it's going to return a JSON response back to you, completely well formatted. It's not going to care about any of the white spacing or formatting issues within the velocity itself. So it's a nice benefit. You can just put stuff into the .json map and in your VTL and know that that's going to come back as JSON when that's hit. Let's go on and take a look at some of these other VTLs. So for example, this put VTL here is a little bit different than the get VTL. What this is doing is it's not using the .json object, and instead is able to just spit out a raw response. And you can see here that this response is going to be XML, and it's going to spit back the method name because we have a handle on the request. It's going to spit back the path parameter that I use in the URL, and it's going to spit back this body map, which is a JSON body that's going to be included in the put, and any query parameters that are included in the URL. So let me show you what this looks like, and I'm old school. I'm going to use curl here instead of Postman or something more modern. But let me just cut and paste this curl command. Okay, you can see here that we're doing a put to the movies, and we're saying that this is a query param, and here's my key. We're passing in a JSON object, and we go ahead and we can get back our XML here. You can spit back out raw velocity. It doesn't have to be JSON. The JSON object makes it very easy to compose a valid JSON response. So finally, let's take a look at the post VTL, the code in this endpoint. is going to accept a post, and I think this is the most interesting example and highlights a new feature in dotCMS 5.1. You can see here what we're doing is we're taking this body map, and this is the JSON that's getting posted in to the endpoint and pushing that through a workflow process. In essence, checking in that JSON as a piece of content into the content repository. And this workflow ID here is the publish action, so that's going to go ahead and publish that particular piece of content. How do you use this? How would you use this endpoint? You take a look at this curl example. So we're curling, we're posting into the movies endpoint, and we specify all the properties that make up a movie content object. Important note, this endpoint supports multi-part processing. So if you want to push a file into a binary asset into the dotCMS repo, you can build that with this. I don't have that example here, but I think that that's a really important capability as well, right? So release date and studio, and this studio is a relationship. And so what we're saying here is relate this movie to any studio that has a name with dotCMS.star, right? And so if I take this and go ahead and post that into dotCMS, you can see what comes back. It spits back out the saved content object. And if I come back to our content repo, you can see here now I have a new piece of content, and it's the dotCMS thriller release with the tags, the poster image, and the studio that I specified in my query. Finally, let me share what I think is a very interesting feature of the scripting API is the ability for it to render scripts dynamically. And so this is a permission-based. You need to have a particular role within the CMS to be able to utilize this. What this allows you to do is to put or post basically the contents of a script into dotCMS dynamically and have that render out and come back as rendered in whatever format you want to see that come back as. So, as a simple example here, our script is we set our date to my date, and then we say hello my date. And if I submit that, you can see here that's going to come back just raw rendered hello today is February 13th. You can see here that it's just spitting back that raw velocity script. You can also use some of the features that are available in the scripting API. So the .json object, if you want to spit back well-formatted JSON, we can go ahead and paste that, and it's going to come back and spit back JSON object properly formatted. And finally, for the most mind-bending example here, I think, is what we're going to be doing is posting in a JSON object that also includes the velocity script to execute with that object. So this, again, is the movie example. We're doing dotCMS extra dynamic. And if we go ahead and take this, what's going to happen is this JSON object is going to be passed into this workflow tool as the body map, and again, will be checked into the content repo. So let me go ahead and show what that looks like. And now if we come back to our content repo, you can see here we checked in a piece of content. Now, why is this an important capability? Well, it allows scripts to be defined externally from dotCMS. Number one, it also allows scripts to be determined at runtime. So, applications elsewhere can post into dotCMS, and dotCMS is going to take that and render that and return back, exactly what that application needs at that particular time. So it's just a very intriguing and powerful capability within the system itself and